Hi, I'm Sarah. Today I'm going to read you the story of Victoria, which is titled like this: I returned home after a hard day's work, but my key didn't fit. My mom texted, "We won't let you in until you pay for our vacation." I spent the night in the car, shivering from the cold. In the morning, I packed my things, ended the lease and left them. In the evening, my phone was buzzing with calls. "Well, let's go?" It was always Jessica this and Jessica that in my parents' house. My older sister could do no wrong in their eyes, while I was just there. That's how it had been for as long as I could remember. I'm Victoria, Tori to most people, and at 27, I'd finally gotten used to being the afterthought in the Carter family. Despite being the family disappointment, I was doing pretty well for myself. I had a solid job as a corporate account manager at TechSphere Solutions, pulling in good money. Not that my parents ever acknowledged it. I'd been renting a nice little house in Meadowbrook, a quiet suburb about 30 minutes from downtown, for the past year. I even had a growing savings account that was earmarked for a down payment on my own place someday. Jessica, 30, had married her college sweetheart Ryan 3 years ago. They had a fancy wedding that my parents spent way too much money on. I was a bridesmaid, of course, wearing a hideous peach-colored dress that Jessica had picked specifically because she knew I'd look terrible in it. "Family dinner tonight," Mom texted me on a Tuesday morning, "Don't be late like last time." I sighed, staring at my phone. Family dinners were monthly torture sessions that I endured out of some misplaced sense of obligation. But I replied with a simple "I'll be there" and went back to preparing for my morning meeting. That evening, I pulled into my parents' driveway, noticing Jessica's shiny new SUV already parked there. Of course she'd arrived early, probably helping Mom in the kitchen and scoring more favorite child points. Dinner was the usual: Mom asking Jessica about her job at the real estate office, Dad nodding proudly at everything my sister said, and me picking at my food while occasionally answering direct questions with as few words as possible. Then, over dessert, Jessica cleared her throat dramatically. "Mom, Dad, Ryan and I have some exciting news." I braced myself for a pregnancy announcement, already imagining how much worse my life would get once Jessica produced the first grandchild. "We've decided to start our own business," Jessica announced, gripping Ryan's hand. My parents erupted in cheers, my mother actually clapped. "Oh honey, that's wonderful," Mom gushed. "What kind of business?" "A high-end clothing boutique," Jessica said, beaming. "We found the perfect retail space downtown." That caught my attention. I have a business management degree that I worked my ass off for, unlike Jessica who barely passed her real estate licensing exam. "Have you done a market analysis?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. "Downtown retail can be pretty competitive." Jessica rolled her eyes. "Don't start, Tori. Not everyone needs to overthink everything like you do." "I'm not overthinking, these are basic business questions." "Have you calculated startup costs, expected revenue, break-even timeline?" "See, this is why nobody likes talking to you," Jessica snapped. "You don't know anything about fashion retail, this is my passion." Jessica sat up straighter. "Actually, there is one more thing. We need some capital to get started." The room went quiet. I had a bad feeling about where this was going. "We were hoping," Jessica continued, looking at our parents, "that you could help us out. Maybe take out a mortgage on the house? Once the business takes off, we'll pay you back with interest, it's a sure thing." My jaw dropped. They'd owned that house for 30 years. It was practically paid off. "That's a terrible idea," I blurted out before I could stop myself. "Mom, Dad, you can't risk your home on a business that hasn't even started yet, especially not a retail business with such a high failure rate." "The business won't fail," Jessica insisted, her voice rising. "God, Tori, you're just jealous because Ryan and I are taking a chance on something we believe in while you waste your life in that corporate drone job." "Jealous?" I repeated incredulously. "I'm trying to keep Mom and Dad from ending up homeless." "No, you're trying to make sure I don't succeed," Jessica shouted, standing up now. "You've always been jealous of me. You can't stand the thought that I might actually do well, might actually make more money than you with your fancy business degree." Jessica had tears in her eyes now, the fake kind she'd perfected to get her way. I stood up from the table. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and be accused of things I'm not doing. Mom, Dad, please think about this carefully before you make any decisions. We will, sweetheart, Mom said, but her tone made it clear whose side she was on. I said goodbye to my parents, ignored my sister and her husband, and left. Driving home, I couldn't shake the sinking feeling in my stomach. I knew exactly what was going to happen. Jessica would cry and manipulate, my parents would give in, and somehow I'd be the bad guy for trying to prevent a disaster. 3 weeks later, my phone rang while I was in the middle of a work presentation. I ignored it, but when it rang again immediately, I excused myself. Hello? Victoria, it was my father, using my full name. He sounded tired. We gave Jessica and Ryan the money, for their business. I closed my eyes, leaning against the wall. How much? We refinanced the house, $200,000. Jesus, Dad. It'll be fine, they have a solid business plan. Jessica showed us everything. I bit my tongue to keep from saying what I really thought. I hope it works out, was all I said before hanging up and returning to my meeting. Almost a year to the day after my parents mortgaged their house, my doorbell rang at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. I wasn't asleep yet, just going over some work documents on my couch. When I opened the door, I found my parents standing there, looking like they'd aged a decade. Mom's eyes were puffy from crying, and Dad seemed smaller somehow, hunched over with an empty look in his eyes. We lost the house, Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't say, I told you so. I wanted to, but the broken look on their faces stopped me. Come in, I said instead, stepping aside. That night, I gave them my spare bedroom. We didn't talk much. They told me the bare minimum. Jessica and Ryan's boutique had failed after 8 months. They'd blown through the money with overpriced inventory, a ridiculous lease, and some business trips to fashion shows that were really just expensive vacations. When the business went under, my parents couldn't make the mortgage payments. The bank had given them notice that morning. The next day, I called my boss and requested to work from home. I helped my parents bring over what little the bank had allowed them to take from the house. Family photos. Some clothes. Mom's china that had been a wedding gift from her mother. It's just temporary, Dad kept saying as we carried boxes into my rental house. Just until we get back on our feet. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without saying something I'd regret. 2 weeks later, another bombshell dropped. I came home from a rare day at the office to find Jessica and Ryan's car in my driveway. My sister was sitting at my kitchen table like she owned the place, with Ryan slouched beside her. There she is, Jessica said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. What's going on? I asked, setting down my laptop bag. Mom emerged from the kitchen with a cup of tea. Jessica and Ryan need a place to stay for a bit. Their landlord evicted them because they're behind on rent. And you told them they could stay here, in my house? I tried to keep my voice level. We're family, Tori, Dad said from the living room, not looking away from the TV. Family sticks together. I looked at my sister. She had the decency to at least appear slightly ashamed, though I knew her well enough to know it was an act. We'll help out, she promised. I'll clean, and Mom will cook for everyone. You won't even know we're here. What could I do? Throw my homeless family onto the street? So I agreed to their arrangement. Mom would handle the cooking, Jessica would clean on weekends, and I would buy groceries for everyone. Dad and Ryan would, well, they didn't actually offer to do anything. The first month was manageable. I worked late most nights anyway, so I'd come home to find dinner ready. Everyone would eat together, make awkward small talk, and then retreat to their assigned spaces, my parents in the spare room, Jessica and Ryan in the converted den, and me in my bedroom. The house was small for 5 adults, but we made it work. But by the second month, cracks started to show. I'd come home to find the dinner dishes left unwashed in the sink. Mom stopped cooking for 5, claiming it was too much work at her age. Instead, I'd arrived to find my parents had made dinner for themselves, and Jessica and Ryan had done the same. Both meals made with the groceries I'd paid for. Meanwhile, there was nothing left for me. After the third night in a row of finding an empty refrigerator when I got home from work, I started eating at the cafe near my office before heading home. It was an added expense I didn't need, but it was better than going hungry. Jessica's promised weekend cleaning became more and more sporadic. She always had an excuse: she was too tired from her new part-time job, she had a headache, she was meeting friends to network for better employment opportunities. One Saturday morning in the middle of the third month, I'd had enough. Instead of going to the grocery store as I did every weekend, I stayed in bed, reading a novel I'd been trying to finish for weeks. By afternoon, my family returned from visiting some relatives to find the refrigerator empty. Mom stormed into my room without knocking. "There's no food in the house," she said accusingly. "It's Saturday. You always do the shopping on Saturday." "I decided not to today," I said, keeping my voice casual. "And when were you planning to tell us?" "We're hungry." I set my book down. I'm tired of buying groceries that disappear before I can eat any of them. From now on, everyone can buy their own food. Mom's face turned an alarming shade of red. "After everything we've done for you." "Done for me?" I cut her off. "You're living in my house rent-free. All I asked was that you cook and Jessica clean. Neither of those things is happening anymore." She turned and stormed out. I could hear her complaining to Dad and Jessica in the living room, their voices rising in indignation. I put in my earbuds and went back to my book. The silent treatment lasted a week. It was childish, but strangely peaceful. I bought my own groceries and put them in a small mini-fridge I purchased for my bedroom. I came and went from the house, and no one spoke to me. Eventually, the Cold War in my house thawed. My mother approached me one evening as I was heading to my room with my takeout dinner. "Victoria, can we talk?" she asked, using my full name as she always did when trying to be serious. I nodded and followed her to the kitchen table. Dad, Jessica, and Ryan were already sitting there, looking solemn. "We've been thinking," Mom started, glancing at the others for support. "Things haven't been going well lately." "We want to fix it," Jessica chimed in, her voice softer than usual. "We know we haven't been pulling our weight." I raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. "We'd like to go back to our original arrangement," Mom continued. "I'll cook dinner for everyone, and Jessica will clean on weekends. If you'll start buying groceries again." I studied their faces, trying to determine if they were sincere. Dad couldn't quite meet my eyes. Ryan was fidgeting with a paper napkin. Jessica was doing her best to look contrite, though I could see the calculation behind her expression. "Why the sudden change of heart?" I asked. "We miss being a family," Mom said, "and let's be honest, none of us can afford to keep buying separate groceries." At least that was honest. I considered my options. The truth was, I missed proper home-cooked meals too. And the silent treatment, while peaceful, was also lonely. "Okay," I finally agreed, "but if things slide again, that's it. I'm not going to be taken advantage of in my own home." They all nodded eagerly, and just like that, we were back to our original arrangement. For a few weeks, everything ran smoothly. Mom cooked hearty dinners, Jessica cleaned thoroughly on weekends, and I kept the refrigerator stocked. We weren't exactly the Brady Bunch, but it was tolerable. Then, one evening in early November, I noticed a shift in the atmosphere when I came home. Mom, Dad, Jessica, and Ryan were already seated at the dinner table, but they fell silent when I entered the room. They exchanged glances as I hung up my coat and washed my hands. "What's going on?" I asked, taking my seat at the table. Mom served the lasagna she'd made with a smile that seemed too bright. "We were just talking about Thanksgiving, it's only 2 weeks away." "Right," I said, accepting the plate she handed me. "I'll have to work the day before, but I should be able to help with the cooking on the actual day." Another set of glances were exchanged around the table. "Actually," Jessica said, setting down her fork, "we were thinking of doing something different this year. We thought it might be nice to get away. Just a little vacation to clear our heads after everything that's happened this year." I paused mid-bite. A vacation, where? There's this lovely resort in Sedona, Dad said, suddenly animated. They have a special Thanksgiving package with all the traditional food but none of the work. Plus hiking, spa treatments, the works. Sounds expensive, I commented, looking around the table. Silence descended again, broken only by the sound of forks against plates. So, I prompted when no one spoke, are you asking if I want to join you? Because I already mentioned I have to work that week. Oh, we know you can't come, Jessica said quickly. That's why we thought it would be a perfect time for us to go. So you don't feel bad about missing out. I set my fork down. If you all know I can't come, why are you telling me about this vacation plan? More uncomfortable silence. You want me to pay for it, I said flatly, realization dawning, that's what this is about. Mom reached across the table and patted my hand. Not pay for it exactly, just help out a little. We all need a break, Tori, it's been such a hard year. You want me to fund a vacation that I'm not even going on? You can afford it, Jessica said, a hint of her usual entitlement creeping back into her voice. We all know how much you make. That's not the point, I replied, feeling my blood pressure rising. The point is that you're asking me to pay for a luxury vacation for 4 adults who aren't contributing anything to this household financially. We're family, Dad said, as if that explained everything. And your mother and I aren't getting any younger. We deserve to enjoy our golden years. And Ryan and I are still recovering financially, Jessica added. It could be years before we're back on our feet. I looked at each of them in turn, these people who were supposed to love me but seemed to only see me as an ATM. No, I'm not paying for your vacation. If you want to go to a resort for Thanksgiving, you'll need to pay for it yourselves. But we can't afford, Jessica started. Then you can't go, I interrupted, that's how money works. If you can't afford something, you don't get to have it. That's selfish, Ryan said, speaking up for the first time. After everything your family has done for you. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. What exactly have you done for me lately? Live in my house rent-free? Eat food I pay for? Take advantage of my generosity at every turn? We raised you, Mom said, her voice trembling with either genuine emotion or a good performance of it. We sacrificed for you. And I've been repaying that debt for months now, I replied. But I draw the line at funding luxury vacations. The rest of dinner passed in frosty silence. As soon as I finished eating, I excused myself and went to my room, locking the door behind me. I heard them talking in hushed, angry voices in the living room, but I turned on my TV to drown them out. The next morning, they were all still giving me the cold shoulder. I went to work and focused on the major project I was leading, staying late to avoid going home to the toxic atmosphere. This became my new routine, early mornings, late nights, minimal interaction with my family. A week dragged by like this. The tension in the house was becoming unbearable. No one was speaking to me directly, though I would occasionally walk into a room to find them whispering together, falling silent when they noticed me. One night, a week before Thanksgiving, I stayed later than usual at the office, working on finalizing a project that was due before the holiday. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. The office was empty, the cleaning staff had come and gone, and I was exhausted. All I wanted was to go home, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed. The drive home was quiet, streets empty at that hour on a weeknight. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed all the lights were off in the house. Everyone must be asleep, I thought, which was a relief. No awkward encounters tonight. I walked up to the front door, keys in hand, and slid my house key into the lock. It wouldn't turn. I tried again, wiggling it gently, thinking it might be stuck. Still nothing. I pulled the key out and looked at it under the porch light. It was definitely my house key, the one I'd been using for the past year. That's when the realization hit me. They had changed the locks. Disbelief turned quickly to anger as I started knocking on the door. When no one answered, I rang the doorbell repeatedly, holding it down until the chimes became one continuous, annoying sound that would surely wake everyone inside. Still nothing, but then I noticed movement behind the curtains. Someone was home and awake, watching me but refusing to answer. I pounded on the door. "I know you're in there. Open the door right now." No response. I stepped back and looked up at the second floor. The light in my parents' room flickered briefly as someone peeked through the blinds. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message from my mother: "We won't let you in until you agree to pay for our vacation. This is for your own good, Victoria, you need to learn to be less selfish." I stared at the message, unable to process what was happening. My own family had locked me out of my own house, the house I was paying for, to extort money from me. I could have called the police. It was my house, after all. I had the lease with my name on it. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the last thread of family loyalty I still possessed, or maybe it was just exhaustion. Instead, I returned to my car, turned the heat on full blast, and tried to make myself as comfortable as possible in the driver's seat. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by the cold that crept in whenever the engine turned off to save gas. At dawn, I woke fully, stiff and shivering. I watched as lights came on in the house and figures moved behind the curtains. Morning routines happening inside my home while I sat locked out in my car. Around 7, the front door opened, and my mother stepped out. She approached my car with a smile that made my blood boil. I rolled down the window just enough to hear her. "Have you had time to think about our conversation?" she asked pleasantly, as if she hadn't forced me to spend the night in my car. I nodded slowly, my mind suddenly crystal clear despite the sleepless night. "Yes, I have." Her smile widened. "Good. Then you can come back inside now." I got out of the car, stretching my aching back, and followed her to the front door. Inside, my father, Jessica, and Ryan were sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast. They looked up as I entered, their expressions a mixture of smugness and feigned concern. "Morning, sleepyhead," Jessica said with a smirk. "Want some pancakes?" I didn't respond. Instead, I walked past them straight to my bedroom and closed the door. I called my boss, explaining that I needed to take a personal day for family reasons. He was understanding. I rarely took time off. Then I waited, listening to the sounds of my family getting ready for work. One by one, they left the house. Dad and Mom to their part-time jobs, Jessica and Ryan to whatever they did during the day. Finally, around 9, the house was empty. I moved quickly. From my closet, I pulled out the suitcases I'd kept from my last vacation. I packed methodically: clothes, toiletries, important documents, a few sentimental items. Everything else could be replaced. Next, I called my landlord. "I need to terminate my lease," I told him. "Is something wrong with the house?" he asked, sounding concerned. "No, it's a family issue. I need to move out." I explained the situation briefly, leaving out the more humiliating details. "The lease allows for termination with 30 days notice, but I'm willing to pay for next month in full if you'll let me out now." He was surprisingly understanding. "Keep your family there until the end of the month if you need to, then I'll take over, no penalty." "Thank you," I said, genuinely grateful. "Could you do me one more favor? Could you come by today and let them know? I'd rather not have that conversation myself." "Sure thing," he agreed. "I'll stop by this afternoon." With that settled, I loaded my car with everything I could fit. For the larger items, I called a storage facility and arranged for a small unit. Then I texted my friend Emma, who lived across town. She immediately offered her guest room for as long as I needed it. By early afternoon, I was gone. I'd left nothing behind that I couldn't live without. As I drove away, I felt a strange lightness. For the first time in months, maybe years, I didn't have the weight of my family's expectations and demands pressing down on me. That evening, the calls and texts started flooding in. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from my parents and Jessica, ranging from angry accusations to tearful pleas. I ignored them all, eventually turning off my phone completely. The next day at work, the receptionist called up to my office. "Your family is here to see you." I went downstairs to find them waiting in the lobby, Mom crying, Dad holding his chest dramatically, Jessica wringing her hands. I led them outside to talk, not wanting to make a scene in front of my colleagues. They begged and pleaded, promising to change. Mom sobbed about not having anywhere to go when the landlord evicted them at the end of the month. I listened to it all with a detachment that surprised even me. When they finally ran out of words, I responded with a calmness I didn't know I possessed. "You chose this," I told them. "You locked me out of my own home and made me sleep in my car. You can do the same now." 2 weeks later, I was settled in a new apartment across town. I had blocked their numbers and removed them from my social media. The landlord confirmed they had moved out, to where, I neither knew nor cared. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly on my own, with no one to please but myself. My savings account, no longer drained by supporting 4 additional adults, began to grow again. Maybe I'd have enough for a down payment on my own home sooner than I thought. Sometimes I wondered if I'd been too harsh, cutting them off completely. But then I'd remember the nights spent shivering in my car, the months of being used, the years of being second best. And I knew I'd made the right choice.